the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We're streaming on TuneIn Radio and newhavenindependent.org. We're also streaming live video on Facebook Live. Just go to facebook.com/newhavenindependent. All right, everybody. So, welcome to Municipal Voice, CCM's radio podcast, in collaboration with WNH 103.5 FM. Today's special guest, we have First Selectman of North Haven, Michael Freda, and we have Public Policy Director Brian O'Connor with us today. Thanks for being here, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us again.
Thank you.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So before we dive right into 2019, let's talk about some stuff that happened at the end of 2018. Specifically, we've got a new administration coming in, Governor Lamont, making some new hires that are pretty interesting. And Selectman Freda, you actually were talking in the Hartford Current recently about Melissa McCaw, who is officially, or will soon be, the OPM secretary. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what that person filling that role means to you as a town leader.
Well, I was very encouraged with that hire because having someone with municipal experience at the state level, I think, is very important. And as I mentioned to the Hartford Current, I really believe that someone with that insight, who has the insight of cities and towns, and both cities.
She worked for
City of Hartford.
City of Hartford. Okay.
I think that can only help us because she, in my view, will have a thorough understanding of what we're up against as municipalities, and taking that experience that she had in the city of Hartford and bringing it to the state, working with Governor Lamont. We think it's good.
Understanding both sides, that is great. And Brian, are there any new hires that you think are interesting or speak to where this administration is heading, what their priorities are?
Yes. I think actually you could tell by the appointments, the priorities that the governor-elect Lamont has. I think one of them in particular is Katie Dykes, who was nominated to be the commissioner of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection.
Yeah.
I think she has a wealth of experience in clean energy.
That's coming from like private sector?
She actually, right now, she was formerly a deputy commissioner of DEEP, then became the chairman of PURA, which is the Public Utility Regulatory Authority.
Okay.
So she comes with a great background in that. She actually implemented some of the programs a few years ago. So I think to continue on that course, you could see that he brought in her experience and her strength in pushing those initiatives forward. I think if you look at his director of legislative affairs, that's going to be Chris Soto.
Yeah.
He has a strong background, from our perspective in municipal government, as far as his knowledge of it. So I think for us and, the state, I think that was a very good appointment as well.
Excellent. One other thing I have at the end of 2018 is we had elections at CCM, and Selectman Freda, you are now our first vice president, so congratulations on that.
Well, thank you very much. I thoroughly enjoyed being a member of CCM, and I love working collaboratively with all the other mayors and first selectmen. CCM is an organization where none of us really care who's an R or who's a D. We work together for the greater good of our municipalities, and we really work toward making a contribution to helping the state of Connecticut. I love that aspect about this, working in a bipartisan fashion.
Yeah, I mean, this year's President Mayor Leary is a Democrat, and you are a Republican, right? Yeah. And so that's a great dynamic, and we have big town, small town, all that kind of stuff going on. And one thing that sort of diverse group allows us to do is to come to, some consensuses on things. And one of the big ones that we came a couple of years ago was the This Is Different report, which was a set of recommendations from CCM to essentially help out the fiscal state of Connecticut, right?
Yeah. We've been working on this for the last couple of years, and I don't think the issues have gone away. In fact, I think they've been magnified with not only the upcoming budget deficits, but out into the future, that we have to do things differently. And I think it was a real testament to, Mike and others that participated in that committee to actually put a series of recommendations into place. One was revenue diversification, trying to lessen the burden, increase capacity in the property tax. I think the other thing, too, are, when you look at shared services, doing things more efficiently between municipalities. and also cost containment, trying to, again, drive down the cost of delivering services in our towns.
First of all, Freda, could you talk to maybe a couple of those, specifically maybe the cost containment and revenue diversification side of things?
We put together a report that took a long time in terms of all of us, the executive board, CCM's members. We really looked at the greater good. And there were components of that report that some of us may not have agreed on in its entirety. But we felt that the report that we brought forward with the revenue diversification, with a reduction of some taxes, with a slight expansion of other taxes to help precipitate economic development growth in the state, as it turned out, it was pretty similar to what the Fiscal Commission came up with. And the fact that afterwards. Yeah. So without that collaboration between CCM and the Fiscal Commission, when we saw the end result of both reports, they looked pretty similar, which we found very interesting.
Same conclusions. Yeah, that is good that good minds with good information are coming to the same conclusions, which I think has got to feel good that you're on the right path with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's also telling that Governor-elect Lamont has been not only kind of diving into those different reports, but also, through the transition team, focusing on just different ideas, listening. I think that's part of his, experience in business.
All the different transition teams. I know Joe DeLong, our executive director, is on one. And last week we had Brendan Sharkey and John Filchek from the NECOG on, and they're both on a committee on shared services, which we actually went into in depth last week. Did you guys catch that show?
Yes. Actually, with regard to shared services, I know that former Speaker of the House Sharkey has been involved with that for a number of years.
It's been a big issue for him.
But we're already addressing that within our local council of government, the South Central Regional Council of Government.
In North Haven, okay.
That's located in North Haven, but it's 15 cities and towns throughout the region. And prior to that, many of us have already been working together. As an example, we have a surrounding town that we may use their truck to help flush catch basins.
Okay.
But we don't have that unit.
And you don't necessarily need it.
We don't necessarily
year-round. You need to go take every job and then...
But they may need some equipment from us. So we will share that as part of a shared service model. Many of us in our cities and towns have accident reconstruction teams. We have teams, SWAT teams of our police departments. That is also a byproduct of shared service.
Yeah, so highly specialized. When you need it, but you don't need it all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great stuff. And actually, I wanted to ask you about this because it was when we were talking about these shared services. One of the statements that Brendan came out with was they want to go big, and there were some big ideas being thrown around. And one that kind of caught my attention was separating out Board of Education as a separate taxing authority, so that town taxpayers would see the education expense versus everything else. How does that idea float with you as a town leader?
We've actually addressed that in the town of North Haven, and I was very surprised with the wide range of opinions on it. On one side, some would say that gives us a great deal of exposure to understand exactly what the intricacies are, where it's being spent. But on the other hand, I was quite surprised by hearing the other point of view. And the other point of view was that it may create a level of acrimony in the city or town, pitting the Board of Ed against the town. So we decided to shelve the idea a couple of years ago. We've been fortunate that we've been balancing budgets. The last 9 years I've been in office, we've balanced budgets, we delivered surpluses, and for the most part, our referendums pass with the two items together rather than bifurcating the two. Some towns do it, some don't. And it, I guess, depends upon the respective constituencies.
Yeah, is that the nature of the relationship between the Board of Ed and the town in North Haven specifically, you think? That it's just a good working relationship?
It's an outstanding working relationship. And I'm very grateful for our superintendent, Robert Cronin, who's actually retiring, and we're in the process now of interviewing and hiring a new superintendent. But we work so closely together. Many times Superintendent Cronin would come in and say, Mike, this is how I see my Board of Ed budget. But I'm very cognizant and want to understand what you think you can afford, what the taxpayers can afford. So it's always a great deal of quality dialogue between the two, never any level of acrimony. And that is a main reason why we never had the need in North Haven to bifurcate the budget in North Haven, yes.
But if you didn't have that relationship, would it be hard for you to function as a town if you were at at odds with the Board of Ed?
I think so.
Like with the way the structure is now?
Yes, I think so. And although I really can't say which city and town, I know there are stories about how the superintendents and the mayors and the first selectmen would be at odds, which would create that divisiveness.
Tension and stuff doesn't get done, yeah.
And that may have precipitated the separate budget in those communities.
Originally.
But I'm very grateful I don't have that.
Well, that is great. All right, so 2019, we're going to a new legislative session, and this is obviously your wheelhouse, Brian. What's big? What's happening this year?
Probably the top 5 issues are the legalization of recreational marijuana,
okay,
legalization of sports betting, tolls, whether we put them on just trucks or do you also include passenger vehicles. And then the other 2 that I know are very important for some folks are paid family medical leave and increasing the minimum wage. Those are probably going to be the top 5 issues that are considered this year as far as the legislature is concerned.
Okay. And do we have positions on these yet that we want to talk about on air? Or
I think from CCM, I think we're kind of monitoring both the sports betting and the recreational marijuana legalization. We haven't taken an official position yet
on either one of those
or tolls. So I think those are on any of those.
On any of those.
So I think but we also are discussing it. So it's not like we're just putting our head in the sand. We understand that these are going to be considered. So I think,
and that gets talked about in our committees, our policy
at
committees?
Our legislative committee, and also to the board of directors,
which is town leaders. That's great. What would you like to talk about next, Brian? Which one of those issues are we most passionate about?
It's interesting. I think one of the things that we're always concerned about is what is the impact on cities and towns. Whenever we evaluate legislation, if you do legalize, recreational marijuana, what are some of the public safety concerns?
On the municipal level.
But also, how does it impact, the educational system? Because now, if it's okayed on a societal level, how does that filter down to, the K through 12 academics and trying to, make sure that, we protect our kids. But at the same time, if it is legalized, how do you roll it out? Because there has been some issues in Massachusetts. Right now I think they've given out 2 or 3 licenses to date. But as far as traffic concerns and
just the actual how it operates,
the day-to-day of
changing however many decades of it being prohibited to suddenly, okay, we're going to do this. How do you make a store that's...
Yeah, and I think we can learn from Massachusetts. We can also learn from Colorado. I think the other thing, too, with sports betting would probably be able to be turned over quicker as far as being implemented. But I think the one thing that you have there is that we have a unique concern. How does that impact, the funds that we get from slot revenue from the 2 tribes?
Foxwoods and Mohegan, yeah. Because there's existing agreements there, right?
There's a compact that, actually, there's opinions on both sides as to whether or not sports betting applies to the compact and would trigger the tribe's ability to withhold slot revenue if we were to do commercial sports betting, outside of sovereign land of the Indians.
Okay. Selectman Freda, what do you think about legalized marijuana or sports betting in North Haven, and also as a board member of CCM? What are you thinking?
I take a conservative view on these 2 subjects, particularly legalization of recreational marijuana. And I say that because I see several things in our communities. I see an epidemic on opiate abuse.
That's a big issue for us.
And I am unconvinced that it's not a gateway drug. I'm certainly interested in opinions on that.
Yeah.
But when I see the hurt and the pain of families in our various communities suffering from the pain of substance abuse, opiate abuse, I need to know whether or not legalizing it is it a gateway drug. Secondly, many of us as municipal leaders work very closely with MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and I'm very concerned that driving impairment with the legalization.
How do you test? How do you
exactly? Yeah. So if we have seen tragedies in our cities and towns with drivers who have been impaired, I'm going to need to know that that is different with legalized marijuana, and I don't know that yet. So I take a very conservative view of that. I am, however, interested because I'm getting a lot of inquiries about medical marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of the past year, I've had many people suffering from cancer, diabetes, neuropathy,
Mm-hmm.
who've said that they have a card, they go to a pharmacy for prescribed legalization of medical marijuana, and how it's changed their lives around, how they could not live without it.
Mm.
So I'm more interested in learning more about that because I see
you see the benefits of
benefits
that, or the benefits of complete legalization you're not so sure about.
And one of the benefits of recreational marijuana that I tend to put aside is the revenue that's generated. I need to know
there is money there. Yeah,
there is money there, but I need to know what the issues are in terms of being a gateway drug and the driving impairment that we've seen as a result
Mm-hmm.
of alcohol. And that's where I'm at right now. A conservative view on that. Open-minded on medical marijuana. I want to learn more about that because I've seen the greater good on that.
Now, when we talk about we have to explore where we're going, Brian, is that something we would research and then report back to the committees? Do the committees find the information? Like Freda saying he wants to learn more. How do we go about doing
I think
that?
there's two processes. There's an internal process at CCM where we will do research, but we'll also gauge the opinion of our members, like First Selectman Freda and others, to weigh in on the subject matter at one of our legislative committee meetings. And also there's the public hearing process that occurs up at the General Assembly in the State House, where a lot of facts and information are provided as well. And I think, Mike brings up a good point. Some people are looking at this, maybe not even from a policy perspective, but the revenue that it'll generate. You get a wide skew of what it will be. Just to put it in perspective, Connecticut is facing a $1.8 billion deficit in FY20 and $2.4 billion deficit in FY21. So I think it's one of those things where, is this the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah,
I don't know.
When we're talking about
but it's not
legalizing marijuana, sports betting, tolls. It's all talking about bringing in revenue.
Yes. And the tolls would be a different animal, so to speak, where those dollars would go to the Special Transportation Fund, not the general fund. So the idea there is that it would be used for infrastructure and
fixing
projects.
roads, so on and so forth. Well, that's great. I'm sorry, I'm blanking here for a moment. Let's look at some of our legislative program stuff here. Under education, we're talking about provide needed budget minimum requirement reform, MBR. What's an MBR and why do we need to reform it?
So MBR is an acronym for minimum budget requirement, and essentially it's a state law that says that a city and town can't give a board of education less money than they receive in the current or previous fiscal year.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that we're all grappling with is funding education, which all of us at CCM, all of our municipal leaders, we support education, in its entirety. But when we have declining enrollment,
which is happening in a lot of Connecticut towns.
Yes, and then budgets continue to rise at a dramatic rate. That's what we're trying to get a handle on. Why? And I think that has precipitated this discussion of, well, if enrollment's declining, why do we have to be subjected to MBR? And it's more of a rhetorical question right now, Ryan.
No, I think Mike lays it out pretty well. I think, in regards to special education in particular, I think that's where a lot of the costs have really been driving up. It's not
part
even
of the shared services discussion on the last episode too.
It's one of those things where maybe in the past we didn't diagnose as well, but I think it's one of those things where every child is entitled to the right of an education, and sometimes they need their special needs and need extra services. And I think one of the things, how can you do that on a regional basis and maybe deliver those services better? Because I think, what you were speaking to before, where maybe you don't use that service a lot, or maybe you have one or two kids, but you have to hire someone for that.
Which on a smaller town could be a significant burden.
Yeah. And if you go to a town with a bigger population of students, maybe they have 10 or 12, how can you put those two schools together in a certain respect, or the students, I should say, together, work collaboratively, so maybe you only have to hire, two people rather than, 3 or 4 to deliver the same level of service.
All right. And then another category, environmental management and energy. And we're talking about municipal solid waste management. And I guess this is something we would like to do, right? Is to prohibit the passage of any new recycling mandates on municipalities. Is that correct?
Yeah, part of the reason for this is, and I want to make it clear, we're not against, expanding recycling.
We like recycling, yes. Yeah, we like the environment. We like recycling.
I think this proposal in particular is tailored or actually put into place because of what's going on in the global marketplace. China
doesn't want our waste.
Yeah, they stopped buying a lot of what we used to sell to them as far as recycling products. So we have nowhere to put it. So I think that's driving the cost because now you have to truck it out into different places that just didn't have the capacity to handle it. And I think before we add any more mandates onto this,
we got to figure out how to
handle it.
And Brian's absolutely correct on this. And one of the things, to put it even into a sharper perspective, is the fact that many of us in our municipalities in the last several years were getting paid, compensated to give waste to someone to haul away. Now, as Brian said,
they were buying.
It was a revenue stream.
Yeah, okay.
Right. But as Brian mentioned, with landfills now drying up, now what we're seeing in our municipal governments is that there's a growing cost to have it taken away. So we move from a revenue stream to now a cost, and that swing can be quite dramatic for our municipal budgets.
And was that a problem in North Haven specifically, or have you run into that?
Well, it is a problem, but we're able to manage this because the swing is not that great. But for, let's say, large cities, it could be a tremendous problem.
Quick.
It really adds up very quickly, yes.
Another environmental issue that we're interested in this legislative session is the virtual net metering credit cap. And we are looking to eliminate the virtual net metering credit cap.
Yes, because
what are the problems there?
Well, the cap, whenever you store or get excess energy and you want to sell it back out, this will allow us to bank more of it. Right now, there's a cap on what we can sell back to the grid.
Municipalities who have set up solar systems, that kind of stuff, they're capped out at what they can sell.
Correct.
So beyond that, they're giving it away. What?
Basically, it expires. So you generate a certain amount of excess energy, and maybe it's a particular month. This will allow you to kind of sell that capacity back out over time. We're losing that excess ability to recoup.
And we were also talking about, I guess, and to maximize underutilized land with that thing, that we would provide preferential consideration for projects that were proposed to be placed on preferred sites, which is landfills, brownfield stuff that's not being used in another way.
Yeah, that's another market trend. If you look at it, particularly some of our more rural communities and suburban communities where farmland is being used for solar arrays. I think the idea is we'd like to keep that as prime land. We'd like to keep it as farmland primarily. But in lieu of that, let's see if we can focus on putting it on landfills, brownfield properties, and maximize the use of those properties.
And that's an excellent point that Brian makes, and many of us in our municipalities have done that.
Do you have solar stuff going on in North Haven?
Yes, in North Haven, as an example, we took a long ago closed landfill, and I worked with an outside contractor, and we put a 1/3 of a megawatt facility on the site of the old landfill, which is adjacent to our Water Pollution Control Authority, the largest energy user in the town. We're going to be expanding that in the spring to 0.8 of a megawatt, which will end up powering 80% of the largest energy user in the town.
That's great.
So, to Brian's point,
so there's some real savings there.
Tremendous savings. So, to Brian's point, the utilization of what we say in municipal government, underutilized assets, in this case, a closed landfill, has helped save a great deal of money on the largest energy user.
And would getting rid of the virtual net metering cap help you guys too?
Well, I'm not quite sure about that, because what we did was we virtual net metered our landfill directly into the Water Pollution Control Authority. I'm not sure if this...
so that's something specific to the deal that you guys set up.
Yes. So, but to Brian's point about not being able to sell the total capacity back, that's a very important point to make. In North Haven, we utilize the virtual meter network system to directly link it to the largest energy user.
So because you're using it personally for your thing, you don't have extra in North Haven.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay, well that's interesting stuff. I was just reminded by the board that I need to let you all know that you are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We are streaming live on TuneIn Radio and newhavenindependent.org. We are also streaming live on Facebook Live. Just go to facebook.com/newhavenindependent, or you can also check out www.ccm-ct.org. Yeah, please do. You can find a lot of the stuff we're talking about tonight, reports like the This Is Different report, all those sort of things are available through our website. So again, please go check that out. Moving on from the environment, we're looking at municipal labor relations this year. I think as we do most years, I think it's a perennial issue, especially the pension issues, right?
Yeah, the pension issues is a hot topic, not only in state level, but also, the local level. I think we actually, CCM, at the direction of our president, Mayor O'Leary, we formed a pension liabilities task force. So CCM is looking at the issue, both at, not only the state level, but also the local level. We have our municipal employee retirement system, and also, while it's funded by the state, we're very cognizant of some of the issues with the unfunded liabilities of the teachers' retirement system.
Because there's been talk in the past that in Hartford, them trying to push some of that onto towns, right?
Yeah, the original proposal by Governor Malloy was to shift fully 1/3 of the cost onto municipalities without capping it.
Yeah.
And, if you go out, I think it's about 15 years from now, that cost has been estimated to be about $6.2 billion. So his proposal were going to affect, his original proposal, I should say, it would be like a $2 billion hit to municipalities,
which
and that's
would have
basically
been
what we get today.
Yeah.
Actually, a little bit less, but it would be a good portion of it.
So when Governor Malloy suggested that before, how much did that freak out town leaders?
Well, I can tell you that out of, at the time, I think it was 167 cities and towns,
Yeah.
it was unanimous to reject that proposal. Because what it really meant is a promise that wasn't fulfilled from the past, and it would have precipitated an immediate tax increase at the local level to help fund that.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I don't think I know, that was something that we had total unanimity on.
That's correct.
Yeah. Nobody agreed with that.
And I was going to say, subsequent proposals to that was to lessen the cost and have it just be for today's teachers, or what they call the normal cost.
Yeah. Has there been any talk of that in the Lamont administration so far?
No, but it was something that during the transition, at least it was conveyed by Governor Malloy. Some of the things that he shared with Governor-elect Lamont is that you need to address the teachers' retirement system. I think he probably presented some of the ideas that he had, tried to,
now, is that something that one of his transition committees?
No, this was aside, just the one-on-one conversation between the two.
But are we expecting something like that coming out of them, like a more
I think
nuanced position from them?
I think there's going to be something on the teachers' retirement system, whether or not it, impacts municipalities as far as us participating or having some of the costs or responsibilities transferred to us. I think that's yet to be determined.
Okay. Also, kind of in the education or municipal labor relations, we're opposing any new unfunded mandates, which is something that one of our perennial issues. Freda, can you just talk a little bit about the impact of unfunded mandates on towns, so the people out there listening can kind of understand why it's such a big issue for us?
Well, if we look at the unfunded mandates, and let's say there's 2,000 of them, I'm not sure the exact number, Brian, but it's pretty high. Each of those individual mandates that municipalities are told we have to do has a cost associated with it. And we at CCM have often looked at certain things, particularly like advertising. Do we need to spend the amount of money in this unfunded mandate on advertising our town meetings, whatever they may be?
Like having to still put it in a paper rather than just putting it on the town website or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we've not made any progress on that, but that's an example of an unfunded mandate that costs municipalities thousands and thousands of dollars every year. So for the general public who may not understand it, I would say to keep it in understandable language, that when you hear about unfunded mandates, those are items that municipalities ask, why do we need to do this?
The state's saying you have to do this.
We have to do this. And each one of those mandates adds cost to a municipal budget, which tends to potentially increase the mill rate or precipitate a tax increase.
Because the big part of that, it's not just the mandate, it's the unfunded mandate where the state's saying you have to do this. It might cost you some money.
Yes.
But we're not going to give you the money. You have to figure it out.
Exactly right.
And there's no capacity right now in the property tax. I think that, one of the things that came out of the transition committees was the fact that, out of all the taxes collected, 42% are property taxes.
Yeah.
So there's really no more capacity for taxpayers to pay on the property tax. So to shift a burden or an unfunded mandate onto communities really is just a pass-through to taxpayers, both businesses and people.
So to help towns do that, we also talked about letting municipalities enrolled in MERS the ability to create new tiers, similar to the way the state has created new tiers for SERS. Can you let us know what MERS and SERS are and how that kind of works?
Well, SERS is the state employee retirement system, and MERS is the municipal employee retirement system. And I think, one of the things we just want is parity. When the state looks to make changes in their, collective bargaining agreements with state employees, we would like that same ability. Right now, ours are determined by statute in many cases. So I think we would like the ability to, negotiate the contribution.
So the state can do that right now, but towns cannot?
Correct.
And we'd like to
level
the
I
playing field
think
a little bit. Yeah.
We would just like to be able to adapt to the current fiscal conditions, not only of the state, but also municipalities.
Yeah. So, Freda, would you agree with that?
I'm listening with great interest in what Brian is describing.
Yeah.
So we're not part of the MERS system in the town of North Haven. What we are on is a system where we have an ARC payment. ARC is an acronym for Annual Required Contribution.
Okay.
We make 100% of the ARC payment every year. And in some years, I've actually added more than 100%.
Okay.
And the pensions are funded at a very high level, which really jumps out at the rating agencies. Rating agencies like a municipality that's in strong financial position. And I learned another valuable lesson a few years ago. Businesses like that too.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to court businesses into your city or town, Amazon's a good example. When they came into my office, we're building a 1.2 million square foot facility in North Haven that we completed at the end of May. One of the first questions they asked me was, Mike, tell us about the fiscal stability of your town. They like the fact that, North Haven, as many other municipalities are, AAA rated, funding the pensions, and with a reasonable mill rate. So I think that MERS aside, for those cities and towns that are not on MERS, my message would be this. Although when we look at the amount of aggregate dollars in our annual budgets it costs to fund that pension program, down through the years, it's been an area where perhaps municipal officials say, you know what, I'm going to just hold off on making that payment this year. I don't want to raise taxes significantly.
Yeah.
That is a problem because it's like a credit card paying the minimum amount on a large amount of money that's due, and it's very difficult to make up.
So it's just smart financial management as a town.
100% of the ARC payment is very important, and secondarily, I think it's also very important to review your pension plans to see what the rate of return is, because we are charged with a return of 7.5%.
Okay.
If our pension plans and the investments are lower than that, the ARC increases every year.
Okay.
So there have been many cities and towns that have redone their pension investment portfolio strategies, and they're yielding more than 7.5%.
So they're exceeding the minimum.
And that helps reduce the annual required contribution.
Oh, that's great.
So that's something that's a little known fact in municipal government. The fact that we have an index of roughly 7.5% we have to return. If we don't, we have to make up the money in the ARC. But by bringing in other seasoned professionals, and if you can increase that, I know there's been a couple cities and towns down through the years, in the past 30 years, that didn't have to make an ARC payment because their returns were
doing so
high,
well,
and they greatly exceeded the 7.5%.
That's great. Sounds like North Haven's doing good on that front. So, saying not everyone participates in MERS, how many towns would that be affecting? Like, how big is MERS?
Well, I think, if memory serves me, it's about 32 municipalities, but it's like 80 entities. It could be a board of education.
Okay. Yeah, so it's not just town. It could be the fire department or whatever.
It could be, yes. Okay. And I think, just to Mike's point too, I think, where they've done their diligence in paying the full amortization or the actual rate that you're supposed to be paying. The state didn't pay that for like 70 years in some instances.
Well, yeah, that's what the big problem is with the pensions. Is that
so we're playing catch up.
Yeah,
and at some point, you got to pay the piper, and we're paying the piper
as a state. Some towns have been paying the piper the whole way along.
But it's a lot easier when you keep up with it.
Yeah, you sound like my mother, Brian. All right, so moving to 2019, what are you excited about legislatively? What are you pushing? What's the message?
I think actually I'm very excited because if you look at just, the tenor of both, the transition policy committees, the governor-elect, actually listening rather than dictating.
Feeling optimistic?
I'm feeling optimistic. I think, it's whenever there's new people taking over, new administrations, it's kind of like a rebirth. I think there's fresh ideas that come out of that. I think, I'm always an optimist in general anyway, but I think there's a great opportunity with some of his appointments, going back to earlier, a lot of his other appointments that Governor-elect Lamont has made have municipal experience.
Which is great for us.
Throughout. So I think it's just something, from a very parochial view on our end, it's very helpful to have someone who's actually been there before and kind of understand what our town,
the intricacies of the issues. Yeah. Does that encourage you as well?
I'm very excited about 2019 for several reasons. Number one, because of CCM, the wonderful municipal officials that sit on our executive board under the leadership of Joe, Ron, and Brian, and others. We really work very well together. I'm also very encouraged that we did meet with Governor-elect Lamont, and we were all very encouraged that to Brian's
the
point,
CCM board, right?
CCM board, and to Brian's point, he seemed like he really was listening to us, and that's something that I thought was a great sign. I'm very fortunate, as many of my other counterparts are. We have great relations with our state legislators. I enjoyed tremendous friendships with our state senators and our state representatives. But what I've always thought, and we mentioned this at the meeting with Governor-elect Lamont, is that we, as municipal leaders, mayors and first selectmen, we're out there every day. We're out there in the streets. We're talking to people. We attend events. And all of us have a very good sense of what's important to our respective communities. And hopefully we can continue to position CCM as having a large voice in 2019 in Governor-elect Lamont's administration. Because we said it that day.
Yeah.
We want the state to succeed. This is
everyone does.
This isn't a partisan issue right now. We all have to work collaboratively together, and that's what we do well at CCM.
Excellent.
Yeah, and just one final point, just to piggyback on that. I think one of the things that CCM is looking at is, we understand there's going to be tough decisions to be made. We just love to be collaborative and work with us, so we can work with you to help find solutions that for the betterment of not only local but state government.
Yeah, and the end goal is the same for everybody. It's just how do we get there?
Yep, the R's and D's go away with our organization.
We're all CT. Aw. All right. Well, I'd like to thank our guests, Michael Freda, First Selectman of North Haven, and Brian O'Connor, Director of Public Policy at CCM. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer. Christopher Gilson is our producer. Harry Draws on the boards. And I'm Matt Ford, your host. And I'd like to leave you this week with a short video from our CCM Chat series. This is where we go out to local areas to talk to state leaders, and you can check that out on our YouTube page as well. There's another interview there with Mike Freda if you want more from him. But I think today we're going to listen to a little bit of something from Aaron Stewart of New Britain. So see you next episode, everybody.
Hi, this is Chloe Capuano, CCM Communications Intern. Today on CCM Chats, we will be talking to the Mayor of New Britain.
Hi, I'm Mayor Aaron Stewart.
Chloe, nice to meet you.
Great to meet you as well, Chloe.
What has your experience been like with CCM?
My experience with CCM. Okay, so I'm mayor of the city of New Britain, 75,000 people, an urban community in the state of Connecticut. We are a newer member to CCM. Truth be told, we were probably, didn't renew our membership. It was a couple years back due to budget constraints and financial problems, which many of our cities across the state of Connecticut are facing as well. But I made the decision to rejoin CCM, and honestly, it was a great decision to make. CCM has just invaluable resources that our staff utilizes constantly, whether it's staff training or the drug prescription program that we took advantage of. It's a lot of research that we rely on CCM for, so it's been great. The staff is wonderful. They're always responsive. They're there when you need them, that's for sure, and that's what we need, especially as our cities and towns, our staff is diminishing because we just don't have the resources to continue to employ people to do jobs they once have done. So CCM is a great resource for us, especially when it comes to looking for information as our staff on the city level is diminishing.
In the next year, what policies will be a top priority for you?
I think as mayor of a city like New Britain, an urban area in the state of Connecticut, a smaller city, but yet still facing the same types of problems as Hartford and New Haven and Bridgeport, it always comes down to our money and our budgeting. How do you keep taxes stable without increasing them? We do have a very high mill rate. And how do you manage your city budget doing more with less, knowing that the state is going to continue to take money away from our municipality? So there's always a balance, and it's difficult, and we need to rely on organizations like CCM to help advocate for us, and going to the state and saying no more unfunded mandates because we can't afford it. Don't, put in laws or legislation that are inevitably going to be passed down to the taxpayer because we're taxed out, we're maxed out, and we're also very, very understaffed. So that's always a big priority. Budgeting is always number one in my mind. So we'll make it work. We always find a way to make it work, but I think that's got to be number one priority.
And what is the most challenging part of budgeting specifically for you?
Making it balance. But I think when I first became mayor of the city here, there was a $30 million operating deficit. And it was my responsibility to reorganize and restructure city government in a way that we could fill that gap, but also ensure that we're still providing the services that our residents expect. And so budgeting becomes awfully difficult when you're not seeing an increase in revenues. But we have had a very unique situation here in the last couple of years where we've seen an uptick in our business climate. It's not a lot, but every little bit helps. And as our grand list continues to grow, we're going to make it a little bit easier for us to get our finances under control, especially when it comes to budgeting. But you've got to get creative when you budget, and you have to think outside the box, and you've got to not think like a government entity or a bureaucrat. Sometimes you've got to think differently. How can I utilize resources to maybe take on different tasks in different departments that they may never had taken on before? And you have to hire people that are great multitaskers and understanding that we've got to do more with limited resources, but also have a customer service orientation to our business as well. I think a lot of people forget that everything we do is based off of customer service to the taxpayer, and we have to make sure that they may not know that our budget is struggling. We don't want them to know that. We want them to have the best experience possible when they come to City Hall.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.